It was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. The flowers were arranged just right, the guests were seated, and the music began to play. But as the bride walked down the aisle, something unexpected happened. The groom's face turned pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. The crowd fell silent, whispers quickly spreading like wildfire. And then, the worst thing possible occurred, the groom fainted, collapsing right there in front of everyone. The scene unfolded in slow motion. The bride froze, her perfect day falling apart in an instant. Family members rushed forward, trying to revive him, but all eyes were now on the bride, who stood in the middle of the aisle, her face drained of color. She could hear nothing but the sound of her heartbeat in her ears as her mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How could this have happened? Everything was supposed to be perfect. The crowd buzzed with uncertainty. Was this part of some joke? Was it an act? But the truth quickly set in, the groom wasn't getting up. The tension in the room became unbearable. The bride, feeling the weight of every single eye on her, could no longer hold back the tears. She turned and ran, disappearing into the back rooms of the church. It wasn't until much later, after the guests had left and the once beautiful wedding venue had emptied, that the full gravity of what had happened began to sink in. This wasn't just an embarrassing incident, this was a disaster, one that would haunt her for a long time. But what made it even worse was the presence of someone unexpected. Her boss, someone she'd worked with for years, someone who always kept his distance in professional matters, was there, standing quietly by the door, observing it all. He hadn't been part of the ceremony, yet somehow, he had arrived just in time to witness the chaos unfold. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes never left the bride, who was now sitting on a cold chair in the corner of the room, trying to collect herself. He had always been a mystery. Everyone at work whispered about his unpredictable nature, his ability to control situations with just a look. But this was something different. This wasn't just business. He hadn't just watched the disaster unfold as an outsider. There was something about the way he stood there, observing, that made it clear this wasn't the last time he would be involved. As the bride sat there, still trying to process everything that had just happened, her mind was racing. What was her boss doing here? And why was he looking at her with such an intense gaze? It felt like more than just sympathy, there was something deeper, something unsettling, in the way he watched her struggle. But before she could question it further, he spoke. "Don't worry," he said calmly, his voice carrying an authority she couldn't ignore. "This isn't the end of your story." The words hung in the air, heavy and cryptic. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. What did he mean? How could he possibly know what she was feeling? It was a wedding disaster, not a business deal. But her boss wasn't finished. "I have a plan," he added, his voice colder now, but still carrying that same undeniable confidence. "And you're going to be part of it." She blinked, unsure whether she'd heard him right. Part of what? How could this disaster have anything to do with him? What could he possibly know about her personal life, let alone be involved in it? As she looked up at him, the weight of the moment sank in. This wasn't just about a wedding disaster anymore. It was about something bigger, something she didn't fully understand yet, but that she was about to be drawn into. And so began a new chapter, one that would change everything. The days following the wedding disaster felt like a blur. She couldn't escape the image of the groom collapsing on the floor, the pitiful silence that followed, and the sudden, sharp reality that her life had just taken a turn she couldn't have predicted. The wedding was meant to be a celebration, a moment of joy, but now it felt like a cruel joke. The rumors were already circulating. Whispers of what happened at the ceremony were flooding social media, and everyone had an opinion about it. But amidst all the chaos, one thing stuck out, her boss. After his cryptic words in the church, he had vanished, leaving her to fend for herself. She thought it was over, that she could move on, but it wasn't. The phone call came 3 days later. It was from him. "Come to my office," was all he said, his voice calm but firm. She had no idea why he was calling. What did he want? There was no reason for him to involve himself in her personal life. He was her boss. She never imagined their paths would cross outside of work, let alone under these circumstances. But the thought of ignoring him, of not showing up, gnawed at her. There was something in his tone that hinted at more than just a professional matter. Something was happening, and she wasn't sure she could walk away from it. She arrived at his office, trying to steady her nerves. The lobby felt unusually quiet as she stepped into the building. The usual hustle of employees seemed muted, like they were all aware of something she wasn't. As the elevator doors opened, she walked down the hall to his office. His door was slightly ajar, and as she entered, he looked up from his desk. "Close the door," he said without looking up. She obeyed, shutting it behind her. The room was cold, too cold for comfort. His eyes, sharp and calculating, met hers. There was no warmth, no sign of sympathy for what had happened. Just an almost unnerving level of control. "You must be wondering why I asked you here," he began, leaning back in his chair. "The truth is, I've been watching you for a while now. I know things aren't going well for you right now, but I'm not here to offer pity. I'm here to offer you a chance. A chance." The words echoed in her mind, but she couldn't understand what he meant. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood up and walked toward the window, gazing out at the city below. "You've had a public failure. Something you didn't expect, something out of your control. I know how you feel. But here's the thing, what you do next is what defines you. It's not about the wedding. It's about how you rise from it." She stared at him, confused. What was he getting at? This wasn't just about moving on from a wedding gone wrong. This was bigger. "I have something that can change your entire trajectory," he continued, his voice steady. "Something that will help you regain your confidence, your power. It's a plan that I've been developing, and I want you to be a part of it." The words didn't make sense. Why her? Why now? And what kind of plan was he talking about? Was this just an offer to help with the wedding fallout, or was it something deeper? He turned to face her. "You've always done your job well, but you've been playing it safe. I want to give you the opportunity to change that. To take control of your narrative. And trust me, when this is over, everyone will be watching." She swallowed hard. What could this man possibly offer her that would fix what had just happened? But as his gaze pierced through her, she felt a strange pull. There was something magnetic about the way he spoke, something that made her want to believe in whatever he was suggesting. She couldn't tell if it was desperation or curiosity, but she knew one thing for sure, she wasn't leaving this room without understanding what he meant. He smiled, the first hint of emotion she'd seen from him. "All I need from you is a decision. You can walk out of here and try to move on, or you can accept this opportunity and change everything." She stood frozen, torn between what she knew to be safe and what was being offered. There was a part of her that wanted to walk away, to leave everything behind and just forget. But then there was another part, the part that had always pushed herself to be better, to do more. That part urged her to take the chance. Her voice barely a whisper, she finally spoke. "What do I need to do?" He leaned forward, his expression unreadable, and for the first time, she felt as if she were stepping into something far bigger than herself. The silence between them stretched, filling the room with a heavy tension. Her heart raced as she waited for him to answer, her mind swirling with questions she couldn't yet voice. What kind of offer was this? Was it really something that could change her life, or was it just a way for him to control the situation further? Finally, he spoke, his tone calm yet firm. "I'm offering you a chance to prove yourself. To rise above this wedding disaster and show everyone, not just your family, not just your friends, but the world, that you are stronger than what happened. You can make this moment your stepping stone, but you have to take it. This is the beginning of a transformation, not just for your personal life, but for your career. She blinked, trying to process his words. A career? How could this possibly relate to her job? She was here because her wedding had failed, not because of some grand opportunity to climb a corporate ladder. I don't understand, she admitted, shaking her head. How does this have anything to do with work? My personal life is falling apart. His eyes locked onto hers with a piercing intensity. That's exactly why it matters. Your personal life is public now. Everyone knows what happened, and you can't erase that. But you can control what comes next. I've been watching you, and I see potential. You've been playing it safe, staying in the shadows, but you're capable of much more than that. What I'm offering is an opportunity to step into the spotlight, to show them who you really are. You'll be in control, and your career will skyrocket. She could feel her pulse quicken at his words, but she wasn't sure if it was excitement or dread. There was something about his calm demeanor that made everything he said sound so much more convincing, yet she still didn't fully understand how this would work. Could she really take what happened and turn it into something positive? What exactly do you want from me? She asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. You're going to help me with a project. Something that's not just about your personal life, but something bigger. It's a plan I've been working on for a while now, and you're the perfect person to help execute it. If you accept, you'll be involved in a venture that will transform not just your reputation, but your future. You'll be seen in a new light, one that puts this wedding disaster behind you once and for all. The words hung in the air, the weight of their implications pressing down on her. Could she really do this? Could she accept an offer from her boss, someone who had always kept his distance, and trust that it would lead to something better? I don't know, she said softly, her mind a whirlwind of uncertainty. I'm not sure I'm ready to jump into something like that. My whole life just fell apart. How can I even think about anything else right now? Her boss studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, he stood up and walked toward the window, gazing out at the city below. It's understandable that you're hesitant. But let me be clear, what happened at the wedding doesn't define you unless you let it. You can either let this moment break you or you can use it to fuel the next chapter of your life. I'm offering you the second option. It's a rare opportunity. But it's yours if you choose it. She stood there, feeling the weight of his words. It was true, this moment could either define her failure or her strength. But could she really rise above it, as he suggested? Could she trust him, especially when she had so little control over the situation? I'll think about it, she said quietly, knowing deep down that there was no walking away from this now. The decision had already been made for her. She had no choice but to take the chance, to trust that whatever this plan was, it would lead her somewhere better than where she had just been. Her boss nodded, a faint smile playing at the corner of his lips. That's all I ask. But remember, time is of the essence. Don't let this chance slip away. As she left his office, her mind was still reeling. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew one thing for sure, her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even begin to imagine. And whether she liked it or not, she was about to find out just how far she was willing to go to escape the shadow of the wedding disaster. Days passed, and the initial shock of her boss's offer began to fade, but the weight of his words lingered, gnawing at her. She tried to focus on her work, but it was hard to ignore the fact that everything around her felt like it was moving faster than she could keep up with. Her life, once simple and predictable, had been turned upside down by a single disastrous event. Finally, the call came again. Her boss was ready to meet. There was no turning back now. She arrived at his office, her mind still racing. The waiting area was as quiet as always, the calm before the storm. As the elevator doors opened, she stepped into the hallway with the same feeling of unease that had consumed her since their last conversation. His door was open again, and she knocked softly before entering. Her boss stood by his desk, his expression unreadable as usual. But this time, there was something different in the air, something more intense. As he motioned for her to sit, she noticed a folder on his desk. It was thick, filled with papers, and he pushed it toward her. "Take a look," he said, his voice steady. "This is the plan I've been talking about." She hesitated before flipping open the folder, her curiosity piqued. As she read through the documents, her mind raced. What she saw shocked her. It wasn't just a simple work project, this was far beyond anything she could have imagined. There were legal documents, business proposals, and what appeared to be blueprints for something massive. A new venture. A groundbreaking project. And it all revolved around her. "I don't understand," she said, looking up at him in disbelief. This is huge. Are you serious? This isn't just about helping me move on from a wedding disaster. This is something else entirely." Her boss nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. "This is the opportunity I'm offering you. It's not just a second chance for your career, it's a way to completely redefine yourself. You'll be part of something bigger than you could ever imagine. And trust me, once you're involved, there's no going back. You'll be at the center of it all. People won't be talking about your wedding disaster anymore. They'll be talking about you, your power, your influence, your success." She sat there, stunned, trying to digest the information. How could this be real? Was this just a dream? She had gone from a woman humiliated by a wedding disaster to being thrust into the center of something enormous. But something still didn't sit right with her. "And what do you expect from me in return?" she asked cautiously. Her boss leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I need your full commitment. Your willingness to go beyond your comfort zone. You're not just helping with a project, you're helping me build something that could change everything. This is not just about business, it's about power. And I'm choosing you because I believe you have the potential to change the game." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. It wasn't just about recovering from a disaster, it was about seizing control of her destiny, about becoming part of something that could elevate her to a level she had never thought possible. She looked down at the papers again, her heart pounding. Could she really do this? Could she trust him? Was this the right path, or was she being pulled into something she didn't fully understand? Her boss continued, his voice soft but firm. "The choice is yours. You can walk away and return to the life you had before, or you can join me and become part of something much larger. You'll never look back. But make no mistake, this is the moment that will define you." The tension in the room was thick, and for a moment, it felt as though time had stopped. She didn't know how to respond. What had started as a desperate attempt to salvage her dignity had turned into an opportunity she couldn't ignore. Slowly, she nodded, feeling the weight of the decision settle in. "I'm in," she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside her. Her boss smiled, a rare, knowing smile. "Good. Welcome to the team." As she left his office, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a drastic turn. What had she just signed up for? And what would she become once she fully committed to this mysterious plan? The decision had been made. There was no turning back now. She had committed herself to something that felt like a leap of faith, but she couldn't deny the excitement building inside her. This was a chance to reinvent herself, to leave the embarrassment of her wedding disaster behind and step into something bigger, something that could change her life forever. Her boss wasted no time. The very next day, he set up a series of meetings, and her role in the project became clearer. It was bigger than she had imagined, far more than just a personal recovery plan. This was a highly confidential venture, involving high-stakes business deals and influential figures she had only heard of in passing. She was no longer just an employee, she was now part of something top secret. At first, everything seemed exhilarating. The projects were ambitious, the goals were huge, and her boss was a charismatic leader who seemed to know exactly what he wanted. She threw herself into the work, her focus unwavering. Every task she took on felt like a step closer to reclaiming her life, to regaining control after the disaster. But as the days went on, she began to feel a subtle shift. It started with small things, small decisions made behind closed doors, conversations held in hushed tones that she wasn't privy to. The more involved she became, the more she realized that there was a lot she didn't know. There were layers to this project, layers she hadn't been told about. Her boss, the man who had offered her this incredible opportunity, was hiding something. It wasn't just a business venture, it was a maze of secrets, and she was being drawn deeper into it. One night, she stayed late in the office, going over some documents when she heard voices outside her door. Her boss was talking to someone on the phone. He wasn't speaking in his usual calm, controlled tone. There was urgency in his voice, something that made her skin crawl. "Everything has to go according to plan," he said, his words sharp and deliberate. "If she finds out too soon, everything will be ruined. We'll lose control." Her heart skipped a beat. She couldn't make out the rest of the conversation, but what she had heard was enough to raise alarms. What was her boss hiding? And why did it seem like she was being kept in the dark? She had agreed to be part of something big, but now she wasn't sure whether it was something she could trust. The next day, her boss called her into his office. There was no warm greeting this time, no welcoming smile. His expression was serious, almost guarded. "I need you to handle this meeting," he said, handing her a folder. "This is a pivotal moment. I trust you're ready." She took the folder, but before she could ask any questions, he dismissed her with a wave of his hand. Something about his sudden coldness made her uneasy. As she walked to the conference room, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something she wasn't fully prepared for. The meeting went smoothly at first. The clients were pleased, and everything seemed to be going according to plan. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the clients, a sharp, calculating businessman, asked a question she wasn't ready for. "How does this tie into your personal life?" he asked, his gaze sharp as he leaned forward. Her heart pounded in her chest. The question had come out of nowhere, and she wasn't sure how to answer. Her boss, sitting at the head of the table, watched her intently. It was as if he were waiting for her to say something, to reveal more than she should. I'm not sure what you mean," she stammered, trying to stay calm. The client smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Come now, you can't tell me all of this is just business. Everyone's watching. The disaster at the wedding, the sudden rise in your involvement here. It's all too convenient, don't you think?" The room fell silent. Her mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over each other as she struggled to make sense of what was happening. Why was this client so focused on her personal life? And why was her boss allowing it? Her boss finally spoke, his voice smooth and calm, as if nothing had happened. "She's part of the team, just like everyone else here. Now, let's focus on the business at hand." But the damage had been done. She could feel the weight of the client's words pressing on her. Was everything she was doing part of a bigger game, one that she didn't fully understand? Was she just a pawn in her boss's plan? She had trusted him, but now doubt was creeping in. As the meeting wrapped up, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being used. The web she had stepped into was getting tighter, and the more she tried to pull away, the more tangled she became. Her boss didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did, and didn't care. But she couldn't stop herself from wondering, what had she really gotten herself into? The days that followed felt like a constant pressure on her chest. Doubt, once a small seed planted in the back of her mind, had now taken root and spread. The things she had heard in her boss's office, the strange conversations, and the way he was maneuvering things, it all felt wrong. It wasn't just about business anymore. There were personal stakes involved, and she was in the middle of something far more complex than she had ever imagined. Every time she met with her boss or worked on a project, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was a hidden agenda. It was as though she were living in a world where everything was a performance, a game where she was the pawn, unknowingly following a script written for her. She had trusted him. But now, the more she uncovered, the more it seemed like everything had been planned from the very beginning. Her wedding disaster, her desperation, her vulnerability, it all seemed to have been carefully timed to pull her into this mess. One evening, as she worked late again, the truth finally hit her like a cold slap to the face. She had been given access to a set of documents that she wasn't supposed to see. They weren't part of the plan she'd been told about. They were different. These documents contained detailed information about her life, her family, her finances, and yes, even the wedding disaster that had caused her so much pain. But what chilled her more than anything was the fact that her boss seemed to have orchestrated much of this. His control over every detail, every event, had been deliberate. The realization shook her to her core. This wasn't a simple offer of redemption or a career boost. This was manipulation on a scale she hadn't been prepared for. Her life had been meticulously engineered for a specific outcome. And all along, she had been playing her part, unknowingly walking deeper into the trap. She couldn't keep pretending she didn't see it anymore. The layers of deceit were now laid bare, and there was no going back. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. The next day, she confronted her boss. Her heart pounded in her chest as she walked into his office, but this time, she wasn't going to play the same role. She had questions, and she wasn't going to leave until she got the truth. As soon as she entered, she saw him standing by the window, as he often did. The moment he turned around and saw the expression on her face, he knew something had changed. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone a little too calm. "You look like you've seen a ghost." She didn't waste time. "I've seen the documents. The ones about me, about my wedding. I know what's been happening. You planned this, didn't you?" Her boss didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his gaze intense and unwavering. "You're not wrong," he said, his voice low. "But it wasn't about manipulation. It was about opportunity. You were always meant for more than you realized. I saw potential in you long before you did. And yes, the wedding disaster, it wasn't a coincidence. But it was the catalyst. It pushed you to the breaking point, and that's where real change happens." She could feel the weight of his words, but they didn't sit well with her. "You used me. You used my vulnerability. And now you expect me to just accept it?" His expression softened, just for a moment, as if he were considering her words. "It wasn't about control. It was about guiding you. You were stuck. You didn't know how to move forward. I gave you the push you needed, even if you didn't understand it at the time." Her mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. Was it true? Had he really done all of this for her benefit? Or was he simply a man who wanted to control everything, to manipulate those around him to achieve his own ends? The more she thought about it, the more confused she became. "Then why didn't you tell me the truth?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Why didn't you just say what this was from the beginning?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because the truth isn't always easy to swallow. I knew you wouldn't understand it then. I had to give you time to see things for yourself. But now, you do. And I need you to make a choice. You can walk away, go back to your old life, and forget everything that happened. Or, you can stay, and we'll finish what we started. But once you make that choice, there's no going back. The path will be set, and there's no turning back from it." Her head was spinning. Everything she had thought she understood had been turned upside down. She had come so far, but now, with the truth laid bare, she didn't know where to go from here. What was the right choice? What kind of future awaited her if she stayed in this tangled web of manipulation and control? The decision was hers, but it felt like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. The days after her confrontation with her boss felt like a blur. Every moment, every decision seemed monumental, as if her entire future hung in the balance. The path she had been offered, one that promised power, influence, and the ability to rebuild her life, felt both thrilling and terrifying. But with the truth now laid bare, there was no longer any doubt that her life had been manipulated from the start. She couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. The trust she had placed in her boss had been shattered, and the promises of transformation now seemed like part of a grand scheme to control her. She had been drawn into a web of lies, and the more she thought about it, the angrier she became. How could someone she had worked with, someone she had trusted, have orchestrated her downfall in such a way? But as the days passed, something changed inside her. The anger and confusion that had once consumed her began to subside, replaced by a sense of clarity. She realized that she didn't need anyone to define her, least of all someone who had only ever seen her as a tool to be used. She had always been more than just a victim of circumstance. The wedding disaster, the betrayal, the web of manipulation, it had all been part of a bigger lesson, one that she was now ready to learn. The choice was hers. She could continue down this path of manipulation, allowing her boss to control her every move, or she could walk away and take back her power. The world was full of opportunities, but they weren't always handed to you on a silver platter. Sometimes, you had to create your own path, even if that meant walking away from the things that seemed too good to be true. She stood in front of her boss's office one final time, her mind made up. The door was slightly open, just as it always was. This time, however, she wasn't stepping inside with uncertainty. She was walking toward the future she wanted to create for herself. Her boss looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. But as she walked toward his desk, she felt a sense of confidence she hadn't had before. She wasn't afraid anymore. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice steady and firm. "I appreciate the opportunity, but this is not the life I want." He didn't say anything at first, his eyes locking onto hers. There was a long pause, and for a moment, she thought he might try to change her mind. But then, he sighed and nodded, as if he had been expecting this moment all along. "I knew you'd come to this conclusion," he said quietly. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for." For the first time, she saw a glimmer of respect in his eyes. It wasn't much, but it was enough to let her know that she had made the right decision. The manipulation, the control, it was all part of a lesson she was meant to learn. She didn't need anyone else to dictate her future. She was the one in charge of her own story. As she walked out of his office and into the hallway, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It wasn't just the end of her time with him, it was the beginning of a new chapter. She had learned something invaluable over the past few weeks, that no matter how much life tried to push her down, she had the power to rise above it. The wedding disaster hadn't defined her, and neither had the manipulation of her boss. She was no longer a victim of circumstances. She was in control. And as she walked out of the building, she knew that whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms, with strength and determination. She had learned the most important lesson of all, that true power comes from within, and it was time for her to reclaim her life, free from the webs of manipulation and control.